Hello and welcome to my video. I'm going to be talking about the weapons that I think that they should add to Stalker 2. My apologies that I'm going to sound tired in some of these, probably most of these clips, because I recorded a lot of this at 4 a.m. So, yeah. Just to get into the beginning of this video, it's going to be unscripted, obviously. I had like a list of stuff that I was going to talk about, so I'm going to talk about that. But it's going to end up including a lot of rambling. I'll try to make it as entertaining as possible, though. And, thanks for watching. So the first thing I'd like to say is that I believe that Stalker 2 has a really good assortment of weapons as it is. I think that there's very few classes that really go underrepresented. Shotguns, assault rifles, and submachine guns have a lot of different weapons in them, and snipers are pretty well represented. The only area that's kind of underrepresented is pistols, I'd say. Light machine guns, of course, you'd say are underrepresented, but at the same time, most Stalker games have only ever had one light machine gun. At the same time, most Stalker games have only had one submachine gun, so that being said, I think Stalker 2 did a really good job with its weapon variety. But this, for the sake of the video, I'm gonna come up with ideas for things that they could add in possible DLCs or possible updates, as well as some changes that I'd like to see to the weapons. Primarily the first caliber, we're gonna be talking about 7.62 by 39. I think it suffers from one major flaw, which is it's been given to the PKM, which is a 7.62 by 54 gun. I think that this is, it's a balancing choice. But when we get to 7.62 by 54, I'm going to present an alternative balancing choice for the PKM. I do find it kind of weird, though, because one of the guns we're going to get to, just spoiler, is the RPD, which is in the game's files as a model. You can see it on the Sardovsk, the boat that Beard used to own in Call of Pripyat. And it's there at the store, but you can't actually acquire it in the game, which is really weird. So with all that prelude about the 7.62 by 39 out of the way, I have to get to the first gun, obviously, and that's, I think it's probably the second most obvious choice, and that's going to be the SKS, the Simonov semi-automatic carbine. And I think that would be, it would be like a really good choice for 7.62 by 39 to introduce really early in the game. It would offer sort of a pseudo DMR for the player to use, because it's not a sniper rifle by any means. It's a service rifle. It's similar to, it was meant to kind of do that same role that the SVT-40 and the M1 Garand did. It was supposed to be the battle rifle, but the AK came along and kind of ruined that. And yeah, obviously I've spoiled what the next gun's going to be, but continuing on with the SKS, it would be really cool because it would be I don't know if stripper clips would be the way to go to right out the gate, or if it would have a stripper clip upgrade, or there probably would be a detachable magazine upgrade you would get at a technician. But I think that I don't like the TAPCO style detachable magazine. I know that they are not the most reliable, and internal box magazine's always the way to go. But ignoring that, for the sake of gameplay, it would be worth it, right? To give it a detachable box magazine to make it more competitive, and maybe it would be a detachable box magazine that's also extended. That would make it even more valuable in the sense of a video game. So a 20-round detachable magazine over your 10-round integral magazine. I assume, just for the sake of it, you pay for an upgrade. You're probably not going to pay and get a reliability decrease like you would in real life. But in the sake of the game, for the sake of the game, you'd get it. And this would be to keep it competitive with the M1A. It still wouldn't have nearly the damage output of the M1A, but it could compete later in the game when you have that quick swap on your magazines, extended magazines, that sort of thing. The SKS is also a pretty accurate rifle in real life. Compared to a standard AK, it's definitely outshooting it. But I don't know, SKSs, they come in... SKSs, a good SKS is pretty accurate, but a lot of SKSs have been through the shit, you know? And SKSs, they're all over the place. Russia created them right after World War II and began producing them in large numbers even after they adopted the AK as their submachine gun, and then later replaced the SKS because they realized the AK made a better rifle than the SKS and a better submachine gun. Because yeah, the AK was meant to be a submachine gun. I'll get into that when we talk about the AK, because we're going to talk about the original Holy Trinity of 7.62x39 that Russia was intending to adopt right after the end of World War II, as I go. And so these first three guns are kind of interlocked, but the SKS, they exported them all over the place. So China got them, that's why China has a lot of them. China exported a ton of them, Vietnam and Korea, and of course, this game taking place in Ukraine, taking place in Chernobyl, there would be a ton of SKSs lying around. There's probably a ton rotting away in Chernobyl right now as the conflict is going on, as Russia invades. And I'm very confident that there are Ukrainian fighters and Russian fighters using SKSs in small numbers in the war right now. I just think the SKS is everywhere. It goes underrepresented a lot of times in games because it's not the most attractive, most appealing self-loading rifle, semi-auto rifle, but to me it's probably my favorite like semi-auto rifle. Even over like the big three of the World War II setup. As far as rifles that are like strictly semi-auto, we're not talking like semi-auto versions of assault rifles. I really love it. That might just be the Canadian in me, because I know in Canada the SKS is kind of a big deal here too. Everybody loves their SKS. Overall, and Mad Max. Like, I know that's completely irrelevant to the topic at hand. We're talking about Eastern Europe, not Australia. But ignoring all of my ramblings, I think the SKS is perfect for the subject of Stalker 2. As far as an early game semi-auto rifle, earliest 7.62x39 rifle you're going to get, and it could probably carry you into the mid-game once you get like an optic adaptation and an extended detachable mag. You could also attach a suppressor and use it like a sort of pseudo-stealth carbine thing. It would have more knockdown power than 5.45, that's for sure. 7.62x39 does have a good bit of punch to it in real life, being a 30 caliber projectile. I think the main consequence, like the main thing with balancing is you don't want 7.62x39 to overpower or overtake 5.56 or 5.45, and so I think the big consequences to 7.62x39 would probably be range and velocity, because it is a slower moving projectile. It does suffer more at range. It has a bit of an arc to it, a bit of a drop off once you get out at distance. So obviously it's not a sniper rifle, we know that, but for the sake of the game, I mean, up close, it's going to perform in the same areas as 5.56 and 5.45. So the other consequence I think they should give is like 7.62x39 is more expensive. It's a heavier round, and so it's going to be more expensive for them to reload, I guess. Reload ammunition, and to get that expensive military ammunition, the armor-piercing kind of ammo and that kind of stuff, to load like special purpose stuff, it's going to be more expensive. It's just the way it is. And so I think that would balance out 7.62x39 well. It still probably would outperform 5.45 and 5.56, but your credits, your Stalker credits might suffer as a result. And so I think it's a fair balancing act. Alright, it took me 3 hours to edit 8 minutes of this video, and we've only gotten one gun down, so I'm gonna try to do this quicker. I am re-recording many of these early ones because I sounded dead inside in the original recording. So the second gun that we're going to be talking about is going to be the AKM, the AK-47. The common name people use is the AK-47. AKM is the stamped version. That's the most common version, and it's classic. It's iconic. Everybody knows what an AK is, a Kalashnikov rifle. Everybody kind of, you see the appearance and you go AK. I mean, in a lot of cases, people see the appearance of an SKS and they go AK, because it's just that like ingrained into your pop culture brain. It's like, oh, it's branded into your brain. like you're a cow, like you're cattle. And so, I don't know. The AK, it has... I won't get into too much detail about the ammunition because obviously it's going to be that 7.62x39 we already talked about in the SKS. More powerful than 5.45, but more recoil, more expensive. Basic concept. And it's going to be that, but in a 30-round capacity, full auto package, more akin to the AK-74 that we already use in the game. In addition to that, I think for balancing sake, it might be a little later in the game. Not quite mid-game, and definitely not late game, but later than the AK-74. Because you get a lot of AK-74s in the beginning, and that's fair. I think getting it, like it starts to unlock... sometime before Wild Island, I guess, would be a reasonable time for it to unlock. Maybe earlier, kind of around the time that you're unlocking, like, the G36, maybe, I think is a reasonable time. It's hard because you'd want there to be more than just, like, the original 3 7.62x39s, but just kind of to make it reasonable, the AKM is, like, the most iconic. It's the main 7.62x39 rifle. I was genuinely shocked to learn that there wasn't going to be one in Stalker 2, and I was even more shocked when I looked back in Stalker and realized they didn't have 7.62x39 AKs before. It was like all 5.45x39, and that just it caught me off guard a little bit is all. Because 7.62x39 is so iconically Soviet, so iconically Slavic. There's definitely a ton of them in Ukraine. There are 100% a ton of them in the war right now, and so it makes sense that there would be a ton of them in circulation in Stalker. It doesn't have to be specifically an AKM either. I mean, if they wanted to make it more tactical, they get to go for like an AK-103, AK-104 type thing. Like just black stock AK basically. There's lots of different AK iterations for 7.62x39. I think this is just kind of, you know, people want that Woodstock classic curved mag metal AK, and I think it would be a good partner to the existing AK-74. Next up is the final in the original 7.62x39 trilogy, and while it is the final one we're talking about, it's actually the original 7.62x39 gun, that being the RPD that we already mentioned before, was in the game's files. So there is a model for it. I assume probably due to like budget issues or just time, they ended up cutting the RPD from development, probably because of the animations. The animations, typically within first-person shooters, to my knowledge, are the most expensive thing. Along with like audio, those are the most expensive things to produce. Animations by far being the top. The RPD, I think it would probably have to be a pretty late game weapon, even though it may kind of, just because of the wood, it looks pretty modest. The RPD in real life fires at a very high rate of fire. It's a high volume weapon. It would probably feed from like the 50 round belts that it usually feeds from, but you can couple those belts, I think, infinitely. And so you could have like the 50 round belt as like the default, and then you upgrade it to that 100 round belt and just shred. These things were used occasionally by special forces units in Vietnam, American special forces units, because they were just, I mean, they were really good machine guns, right? They were fairly small, high fire rate, fired a 30 caliber projectile. It's basically everything that a 1970s man could want. And it's pretty much everything that a modern man could want. For the time period, pretty iconic. These things got all over the place. China produced their own versions, and I believe a few other Soviet nations produced their own copies, but the RPD was mostly Russian. I think the PKM kind of took the machine gun role for most other Soviet nations. But the PKM is a general purpose machine gun, which is to say full caliber, full power machine gun, while the RPD is more of a light machine gun using an intermediate cartridge. There's not much to say about how it would behave in Stalker, because it's kind of just like, it's a machine gun. It would fire fast. It would fire many bullets. And that's kind of why I'm going to mention other light machine guns when we get to the other calibers where light machine guns are applicable, but I'm probably going to skim over them for the most part, because a lot of it is just going to be, it's going to be a heavy, high ammo assault rifle, essentially. I think when we get to 7.62x54, I will talk about balancing changes that might make the RPD a better weapon than it, just because the RPD won't have to use special ammunition, that sort of thing, as often. You could easily use the standard ammunition, but I think that balance really doesn't matter that much, considering how much more damage the PK would be. Again, later unlock, skimming over most of this because it's a cool gun and I really like it, but I really need to speed this video up a little bit. Next, I'm going to talk about a variety of 7.62 assault rifles, 7.62 by 39 assault rifles that could be used for like upgrade variants for the AKM, that sort of thing. The first one is the VZ58, which I think a lot of people, this is one that is very often confused for the AK because it does look very similar. The VZ58 is it was a Czech-made assault rifle that was meant to be like Czechoslovakia's equivalent to the AK. It has 0 parts compatibility with the AK, and even the magazines are completely proprietary. The only thing that it has in common is that it is a 7.62 by 39 30-round magazine. Full auto assault rifle. It even fires faster because the bolt throw is much shorter. It's striker fired. It's just a very interesting rifle. I think it would have to be like an improvement to the AK in the game because of that increased fire rate, though it might end up being a bit of a side grade because that increased fire rate makes it almost like a submachine gun. But not quite. Like assault rifles, I don't know. Assault rifles have a weird treatment in Stalker, so it might be kind of just a weird high recoil machine gun thing. Next is the Fort 228, which I believe is the Galil Ace 31, 32. The Galil Ace series is kind of confusing. So basically, Fort is a Ukrainian company that produces IWI products, and IWI is an Israeli company, Israeli Weapon Industries. Fort produces all these weapons under license for various contracts. I'm going to mention Fort quite a few times, and it's almost exclusively going to be weapons that you could recognize from IWI. This being a Galil Ace 7.62 by 39 assault rifle. The 228, Fort 228, I think is a short 7.62 by 39. I'm not sure if the designations change in the same way that like the Galil designations change based off the length, but for the sake of it, I would say this would be like the final frontier sort of for the 7.62 by 39 assault rifle. It would be more accurate, it would be higher reliability, you know, it'd just be the end game 7.62 by 39. You'd unlock this at the same time you're unlocking the Malyuk and the Carmel. I'm not sure what their in-game names are. The K-Rod, I think, is the Carmel's in-game name, and the Malyuk, I don't know. Next is another Czech product. This is a more modern Czech gun. This is the CZ Bren 2, which is it was the most modern version of the CZ 805 Bren, which was in Payday 2 and Call of Duty Ghosts and stuff. It was a pretty cool assault rifle, and it is a pretty cool assault rifle. That was mainly in 5.56, but the Bren 2 has a 7.62 by 39 iteration that uses its own proprietary magazine that goes straight in. It's kind of like the Czech S.T.A.L.K.E.R in a sense, and the S.T.A.L.K.E.R originally was supposed to have a 7.62 by 39 variant that I believe was prototype, never went in production. They now have a Bren 3, but the Bren 3 I believe was only introduced this year, maybe last year, I'm not 100% sure. But with Stalker taking place before the 2022 invasion by the Russian forces into Ukraine, it would make it anachronistic to the time period. Last for 7.62 by 39 is going to be RPK. The RPK, I think most people go, it's a big AK. It kind of is. It's for the most part, that's what it is. We've already talked about how the length of the bolt throw affects fire rate. On the VZ58, the shorter bolt throw results in a faster fire rate. On the RPK, longer bolt throw, because it has an extended receiver, results in a slower fire rate, which means that the RPK is a slower firing light machine gun. That makes it a more squad support weapon rather than a buzzsaw like its counterpart, the RPD. I don't have much else to say. Again, it's an LMG. It's really hard to justify a lot of this stuff. For the sake of the assault rifles, the earlier assault rifles, I'm talking about upgrades and stuff, but LMGs, it's like, And there are 5.45 RPKs and such that I'm going to talk about once we get to 5.45, but for now, the 7.62 by 39, the classic RPK, is the one I mean. And last, I know I'm talking about ammo, but I'm just going to throw in here, I would really like to see the OKP7 sight in the game. I think it's a really cool red dot sight. It's like very distinctly Slavic. It's a really cool looking classic AK mounting red dot sight, and I think it would be really cool if this was added to the game and you could put it on like a lot of these 7.62x39 guns, but also you could put it on your AK-74, you could put it on your Saiga, that sort of thing. It's just a cool, like, open red dot sight. Alright, so the second caliber I'm going to talk about is the 7.62x54 rimmed, which is the PKM's real-life caliber, and 7.62x54 is in the game. It's used by the Dragunov and the SVU, so the bullpup Dragunov. I think before I get into any like guns that should be added for 7.62x54, because I don't think that's really that big a deal, I'm going to talk about my logic behind the PKM transitioning to 7.62x54 like it is in real life. Because Stalker 2 has round variants, ammunition types, in the game, and I think that having more expensive precision ammo that works well in snipers would be a good idea, and then having a machine gun grade ammo that deteriorates your sniper faster but is more abundant and cheaper would be a good idea and a good way to balance the two. You get the Dragunov earlier as well, so like you're mostly going to come across just that rare sniper ammo, and if you come across that machine gun ammo, it's like, do I want to use it? You know, you don't really want to use it because it would destroy your gun. It's the cheap shit. But, you know, like for the PKM, though, the PKM is made to take that. So the PKM wouldn't take extra damage. It would just rock the way it's meant to. And I think that that's like a solid solution to the problem of the machine gun balancing in order to allow 7.62x39 to exist separately and 7.62x54 to be in the gun that it is in real life. So I think that that's a proper way to do things. As for guns to add, I think the most desirable is going to be the mosin-nagant. I think most people want to see a mosin. It's the kind of like, Stalker doesn't have a lot of snipers and it doesn't have a lot of sniper options. I do like the Remington 700 in the game. It feels really slick, but just like, yeah, like, it doesn't feel right using the snipers. It feels like a waste most of the time, in my opinion. And I think the mosin-nagant would be like a nice way to solve that issue, having it use like, oh, you get the aforementioned cheap, shitty machine gun 7.62x54, and you throw it in this clumsy bolt action that's dropped by a bunch of random idiots, and you just kind of rock and roll with that as your like pseudo sniper for a little bit. Like the SKS would be a better solution, but this could one hit a lot of stalkers, even though it's gonna destroy the durability of this gun because of the balancing. It would be fun. It would just be a fun early game solution, and you wouldn't have a scope. You might get a Mosin PU like optic or some sort of like clumsy Western style mount adaptation, but I think that just rocking with the iron sights would be really fun, and that's like the super Slavic way to do things. And similar to the SKS, I think there probably are a lot of these things rotting away in Chernobyl right now in the real world. And I mean, we know that these things are over in Ukraine because I believe Ukrainian and Russians are like patrols and stuff have been spotted using mosin-nagants. There's no reason why the mosin shouldn't be in the game. And as far as like adding something for 7.62x54, I think this is the most desirable by far. It could reasonably be a DLC weapon. I just think it would be really fun if this was like a free patch weapon, similar to what I would like to see with 7.62x39. It would just be a really fun early game weapon, in my opinion. For other 7.62x54 guns, there's nothing really too major for 7.62x54. The Dragunov, SVU, PKM, and Mosin are like a really good selection, but just for the sake of the video, like Tokarev, DPM, or DP28, or DP27, depending on who's talking. The DPM is the modernized variant. Would be pretty fun. It's cool. It's got that dinner plate, which the big pan magazine, the dinner plate. That's what people nicknamed it in Call of Duty World at War. And the SVT-40. That's another option. 7.62x54 is weird because like a lot of the guns are just going to be similar to guns that are already in the game, that aren't just like World War II weapons. And I think that like The SVT-40 is a bit of a stretch. The DPM would be kind of cool, but like the Mosin. The Mosin is the 7.62x54. I want to see the Mosin and the change to the PKM. So the next caliber I'm going to talk about is going to be the 9x19mm. I believe I said before that there is only one 9mm pistol in the game, and it is the unique Gambit variant that you are given in the early part of the story. So the fact that there's only one unique 9mm pistol is kind of weird to me. It might be some sort of strange balancing thing, it might be a budget cut thing, but in my opinion, that's something that Stalker 2 really needs to add. I think as far as submachine guns go, it has a healthy quantity. It just needs more 9x19mm semi-automatic pistols. The first 9x19 pistol that I think they should add is going to be the Fort 21, which is... So, okay, Fort, again, we've talked about Fort already. They're a Ukrainian manufacturer of firearms that primarily produces Israeli IWI-designed firearms. The Fort 21 is a version of the IWI Jericho pistol. And also, Fort is already represented in the game with the Fort 221, which is their version of the Tavor, referred to in-game as the Fora 221. And so I think if they were to add more Fort weapons, they would simply be referred to as Fora, and then using the numbers, or possibly other numbers. In this case, for Fort 21 and Fort 221, it might be confusing. They might want to change it, and since this is a version of the Jericho 941, it might make sense to call it the Fora 941, or just give it a new name altogether. The reason I've chosen this pistol, other than the fact that there are versions of it that have been produced in Ukraine, is because it's my personal favorite pistol, possibly of all time. I think that the Jericho is just a very handsome looking handgun. As far as 9mm pistols go, 15 round capacity, double stack. Continuing onward, another Slavic pistol is going to be the AREX or RX Delta pistol. This is a Slovenian pistol that has been getting some attention in recent years. The second generation of these pistols was introduced around 4 years ago and has been making the rounds as a fairly successful Glock competitor. It's also won some NATO Special Forces contracts, so that says something. I should sub-mention Glock here, but Glock tends to get a little picky about which companies represent their guns in games, and games typically have to alter the Glock design in order to represent the Glock without getting a lawsuit on their hands. So a game like Stalker 2, to avoid lawsuits, I'm just going to avoid Glock altogether. The RX Delta 2, I think, would be a good Glock alternative. 17 round magazine or 15 round magazine, depending on the size. Another very cool semi-automatic striker-fired pistol, and this one is the one that I think they should add, but I chose to represent the Slavic design first. This is a German pistol, the Walther PDP. This is essentially a successor to the Walther PPQ, which is a successor to the Walther P99. And the PDP is a very good pistol, a really cool pistol. I did have a chance to handle one a while back, and they are really comfortable. They are optics-ready, combat, semi-automatic, striker-fired pistols, and also I think it would be cool because the Walther P99 was in the original Stalker games as the Walker P99, and that would be just cool to see the Walker PDP come into the game. The next pistol is going to be a pistol of Russian origin, that being the PL-15 or MPL Lebedev design semi-automatic pistol. These are essentially like a low bore axis semi-automatic striker-fired pistol. A cool looking pistol, but I don't know. I don't think it really... It would fit Stalker, but I don't think it's numero uno. The next pistol is going to be a Beretta Model 92 FS, Beretta M9A1, Beretta M9A3, a Beretta M9. I know I said earlier, the Jericho is my favorite 9mm pistol. Beretta comes in number 2, just for the looks alone. They're sweet-looking pistols, and they were in the original Stalker, a 92 FS, so I think that having a Beretta in the new Stalker would be pretty slick. It's an option. And the last pistol I'm going to bring up, I know there's tons and tons of 9mm pistols that are options. The last one is another Russian design, the GSH-18, which I think would be pronounced like Gusha. I don't fucking know. But it's the GSH-18 9mm pistol. This is just like some compact combat pistol. This is like last because it's the least interesting to me. I think the coolest would probably be the Fort 21 and the Walker PDP. That would be sick, because they already have names for the game. The Fora 21 and the Walker PDP sounds awesome, and I think those would be really cool 9mm pistols for them to add. That's pretty much the only other thing in the game that I think is really, like, distinctly missing from their arsenal. Continuing on, for the sake of the video, I'm going to talk about 9x19 submachine guns. And there's not that much when it comes to 9x19 submachine guns because the game already has the Vector and it has the MP5. The first 9mm submachine gun I'm going to bring up is going to be the Micro Uzi. And I couldn't find concrete sources on if Fort produces a clone of the Micro Uzi or what it would be called if they did. I actually recorded myself talking about these submachine guns the other day, and then while I was editing the Micro Uzi part, I remembered Croatia had produced a perfect clone of the Uzi back in the 90s during the Croatian Homeland War. It was called the Arrow, spelt E-R-O, but pronounced as Arrow, and it was an unlicensed, perfect parts interchangeable copy of the Uzi. Later, Croatia would go on to produce the Mini Arrow. Now the Mini Arrow, even though it looks like a Micro Uzi, is somewhere between a Micro and a Mini Uzi. It was a compact submachine gun, still used the Uzi mags, but had a telescoping buttstock similar to the MAC-10. It kind of ends up having a little bit of a scorpion tail-like look to it. It is a distinct offshoot of the Uzi in a lot of ways, because the length was determined by the fit of the stock. So yeah, back to the video, I guess. The next one is going to be either the PP-19-1 Vityaz or the newer PPK-20 submachine gun. A lot of people like the Vityaz. It's the successor to the Bison, and it's interesting because it took the Bison in a more MP5 direction with a 30-round stick magazine, more compact, just more conventional AK submachine gun, what you'd think the AK submachine gun would be like. I think it's cool. I think most people this would be the first thing that they would ask for in a lot of cases. The next 9mm submachine gun I'm going to suggest is going to be the Scorpion Evo 3A1, which the Evo 3A1, it's produced by CZ. It's Scorpion with a C instead of with a K this time, because the Scorpion with the K is the original 32 ACP little submachine gun that you might see in a lot of movies and stuff. This newer Scorpion looks a lot more like a plastic tactical MP5. It's kind of like if the MP5 and the UMP had a baby and then they put it in the microwave. I don't know what the fuck that means, but I said it. The Evo 3A1, it's a really cool little submachine gun. It fires pretty quickly, to my understanding, at around 1,000 rounds per minute. It's nice, it's tactical, it's compact. I like it. It's got more rails. That's always nice. It is not roller delayed. It uses instead a direct blowback. The next submachine gun that I'm going to suggest is, for the time period that this game takes place, would be brand new, essentially. That being the Broad River Tactical CAR 15 SD, a 9mm AR using the radial delay blowback mechanism found within the CMMG Banshee, and an integral suppressor in a similar vein to the MP5 SD. It's just got a cool look to it, it's tactical, and I don't know. Yeah, I just wanted to mention it. It might be too new, given that the earliest I could see this in public hands was in the hands of one individual in December of 2021. Though an integrally suppressed SMG would be really cool. Alternatively, just the MP5 SD would be a fun addition. And the last submachine gun for 9mm I'm going to suggest, 9x19mm, is going to be the PP-2000. There's another Russian submachine gun. I think this one's more interesting than the ones I've suggested so far, just because it's got a bit of a wonky aesthetic to it. This was kind of made for special forces units, I believe, and like counter-terror and stuff. It had a special armor-piercing ammunition that was developed for it. And it's cool. It's been in a lot of games. It's been in Battlefield games mostly, I think. But I think it's a cool submachine gun, nice and compact and tactical, and I'd like to see it in Stalker. Next, we're going to be talking one step down from 9x19. That's going to be the 9x18 Makarov ammunition. This is used in the Makarov pistol and the Stetchkin, as well as the PP-19 Bison and the Kaparis submachine gun that's in the game. And those are all, I think that's a great selection. I think 9x18 has been treated pretty well. The first gun I'm going to suggest is probably the best answer for 9x18, just because it's a step between the Makarov and Stetchkin APS, and that's going to be the Fort 12 or Fort 17. So as you can see, the Fort 12 is a more traditional, sort of compact 9mm. It sort of resembles a SIG P220 if a SIG P220 was shrunk down a little bit. And I just found an image of a Fort 12 that's been blinged out on a alamy.com stock image website. The Fort 12 and Fort 17 are, you know, neat looking pistols. They're, of course, Fort, so they're made in Ukraine. They hold approximately 12 +1 rounds of ammunition, and there are also 24 round magazines. That's cool. And there are also versions that were scaled down to 380 if they end up holding that. Yeah, it would be a good interim pistol. Like a reason to not use Skiff's pistol. That's one of the big things with pistols, is Skiff's pistol is just so good. Why would you ever use it? The next 9x18 pistol I'm going to suggest is, I think, more handsome than the Fort 12. That's my opinion. Though, I don't know, maybe I like ugly guns. That's going to be the CZ82 or VZ82. The VZ82 is a Czech pistol, again, and it is a 13 round capacity, 9x18 Makarov semi-automatic pistol. Very similar to the Makarov itself, but in a double stack configuration. Pretty simple. It might be one step above the Fort 12, but the Fort 12 has a more unique look, while I think the CZ82 has a more handsome look. It looks more like a Makarov, and that might make it kind of boring. The next is going to be a Makarov PB. This is kind of like, it's a little bit weird because the Makarov is already in the game, so why not just add like the integrally suppressed version of it? It's cool. I don't know. There's not much else to say other than it would be a neat... Oh, fuck. Sorry about the lasagna jump scare. that caught me off guard. Okay, so that concludes the 9x18 pistols. And now, 9x18 submachine guns. There's not many good ones. I think the K.A.R and the Bison really are the best, but I guess there's always the PM63 rack, which is a crazy little submachine gun. It's a very cool little open bolt submachine gun. It's open bolt, but it uses a slide, which results in this wonky appearance to it. I remember it from Black Ops 1, and I thought it was really cool back then. And then they brought it back in later Call of Duty, I think Black Ops Cold War, and it was kind of ugly. I think it was closed bolt in that game, so it just looks stupid to me. It's not that, it wouldn't really do much. It kind of would behave in a similar fashion to the K.A.R, so there's not much reason to add it, in my opinion. The next handgun round, and our last handgun round that's already in the game, that's like a real-life handgun round. 'Cause I know the Rhino fires a rifle round. It's a funny thing. The 45 ACP. The 45 ACP, it's already in the game. It's used by the USP or UDP in the game. It's underpowered as it stands in the game. I know 9mm and 45 are behaviorally, like in ballistics gel tests, similar. And I know there's arguments about 45 and 9mm. The fact that 9x18 is outperforming 45 ACP is a little wonked, so I think they need to fix that. The first firearm that I'm going to suggest is probably the most obvious, a 1911. A classic Colt style 1911, Kimber, Springfield, it doesn't matter. Could be a Springfield operator. The Springfield TRP operator is a pretty cool pistol, full-length rail version, but I mean, we all know what a 1911 is. 7 or 8 round capacity, a 45 ACP, and a standard magazine, flush fit, and you got pretty good combat weapon there. The next weapon I'm going to suggest is another one that was in the original Stalker, and that's going to be a SIG P220. The original P220s were in 9mm, but when they came to America for export, they were exported in 45 auto. Because they are single stack handguns, they are single stack 8 round capacity handguns, much like the 1911. And so I think if they were to add this, it would either be this or the 1911, so I'm probably leaning more towards the 1911, but the P220 is more Euro. The next gun I'm going to suggest is going to be a 2011. There's tons of 2011s out there, and they come in 9mm, of course, mostly. I believe Staccato produces exclusively 9mm in the modern day, but they also come in 45 auto, and the 2011 is essentially a new way to make a 1911 in a lot of ways. It's still single action. Most of the slide and those sorts of components are very similar, though tuned up. Of course, the 1911s got tuned up as well, but the 2011s, they're now double stack. They use multiple parts to make up the frame. So there's a sort of lower frame and then there's a grip module. Though some companies make the frame monolithic. S.T.A.L.K.E.R, one of the original big 2011 manufacturers. Of course, S.T.A.L.K.E.R, terrible name. So they changed to Staccato in recent years. While I was researching, I also remembered the Arsenal AF 2011 pistol, which is a double barrel single stack 45 auto 1911. These things were pretty silly little pistols. I believe that there's a new company manufacturing essentially the same concept that these used to be. I'm not sure if it's the same manufacturing branch, because I'm pretty sure they're made in Italy or something, and then they're imported in the United States. I don't know what the lore is, but it's essentially two 1911 stitched together, unlike the other 2011. The confusing part, but this is kind of the more goofy one. I remember this showing up in Killing Floor 2, I think, and it was just a funny pistol. The fact, and then the last handgun for 45 ACP, I think I saved the best for last, and that's going to be the Ruger Red Hawk. I made this playlist a while ago, and I genuinely at that time thought the Rhino, the appearance of the Rhino in Stalker 2 was not appealing to me. I think it's grown on me quite a bit. The Colt style cylinder latch and the Korth style barrel shroud. To me, the reason I didn't like it was because it was, I thought, like a fake gun, but now, kind of getting more into it, I don't know. It could be some obscure European revolver that I've never heard of. It's cool, though. And that's the most important thing, is that it's cool. So the reason why I added this revolver, the Ruger Red Hawk, in 45 ACP, is because I wanted to propose a alternative revolver that could be added for the sake of me not liking that revolver at that time, that would not include a new round. So the 45 ACP Ruger Red Hawk uses moon clips, so it would reload in one swift motion, and I don't know, I thought it would have been cool. But honestly, the Rhino's grown on me a lot. I have quite a bit of footage of me playing with it. All I really had to do was use it to realize how much I liked it. Next is going to be a 45 ACP submachine gun, and I think I kind of phoned in a lot of these submachine guns because the game has a good submachine gun selection. The HK UMP 45 is pretty much primo the submachine gun that should be added to Stalker. That's just my opinion. It would be a really good, like, an alternative to a shotgun in a lot of sense. I think 45 should be better at killing mutants than people, just because of its larger, like, diameter bore, something like that. Gamer logicking this thing, it's a bigger bullet, so it should kill monsters better, and then a better armor-piercing round should kill people better, I guess, is kind of my logic. But the UMP 45 would be like an alternative to a shotgun in that sense, because you could have it on you to kill mutants, but it could also function as a combat weapon. It's full auto, 45. It's like, it's a solution, it's not the solution. I think it would pair well with the Mac 10 Ingram that's already in the game. And yes, I know it's called the Gordon in the game, which is because it was designed by Gordon Ingram, who he kind of had the idea that, like, the M3 grease gun, he'd replace it with, like, the M4 submachine gun, M5 submachine gun. He just kept going and going until he got to the M10, which is the Mac 10, and the M11, which is the Mac 11. These were originally designed to use huge suppressors and be used by snake eaters in Vietnam. And also, I would really like to see the Ingram be able to use its stock and the big suppressor like it was originally intended to be used by Gordon Ingram. Though, whatever, it's a machine pistol in the game right now. Really, that's all it is. And it's cool. I'm not complaining about the way that they portrayed it, but that's something I would like to see. This was supposed to be about guns that they should add, not about guns that they already have. So I'm gonna silence myself and continue onward. Seeing as this video is already like 40 minutes long and I only just managed to get through the handgun rounds, I'm gonna try to speedrun the shotguns, because shotguns are basically, in my opinion, the best overall selection that Stalker 2 has to offer. They added a lot of really cool shotguns. There's really no need to add another pump shotgun. The Benelli Supernova, if they were to add a new pump shotgun, would be kind of cool. I like the Benelli Supernova. It's a nice tactical modern combat shotgun. They could add, like, the compact variant. The RMB 93 is a really weird kind of pump action. It's a forward pump action shotgun with a magazine tube on top. It's Russian, so that's kind of interesting. The TS-12 shotgun was designed by IWI and released about 5 years ago, 5-6 years ago. It's a shotgun that uses 3 magazines that rotate in place, and you load them from the side, like a side gate on a revolver sort. I think this would be cool for Stalker 2 to add. I think that's probably the number 1 shotgun I think Stalker 2 should add. Mainly because I don't remember which Call of Duty, but one of the Call of Duty has added it recently, and they thought it was like a bison drum instead of the rotating magazines. So it would have 15 rounds, but it's in 3 separate magazines of 5 rounds, and you rotate between the magazines as you go. It's cool, it's tactical, it's got a whole sci-fi look going on to it. Kind of for the sake of it, I don't know why I added the TAWS 194. I guess, I don't know, I was watching a lot of Insurgency Sandstorm videos at the time, so yeah, there it is. And then the last 2 shotguns that I'm going to recommend, the M26 Mass, which is already in the game as an underbarrel attachment. I think it would be cool if they could use the individual weapon system version of it. Though in the game, the M26 is represented as a semi-auto shotgun when it is in fact a side-charging bolt-action shotgun, straight pull, essentially bolt-action shotgun, which is really weird. I know it's really weird, but that's the truth. It's a straight pull bolt-action shotgun. Finally, the SPAS-12. It's already in the game. It's beautiful. I do like where the SPAS-12's at, but one thing with the SPAS-12, I think it would be neat if we could switch it to pump action. It's totally unnecessary, and I don't think for the sake of Stalker 2's gameplay it would change anything, because Stalker 2 is a pretty realistic game, so it's not like you'd get a tighter spread or higher damage for switching to pump action. But just because it would be fun. I think maybe it could have improved reliability or reduced weapon deterioration if you switch it to pump action mode. I don't know. I think it would be cool. Next is 5.45 by 39. This is the main assault rifle round, and I think that the most obvious pick is going to be a rifle that was in the original Stalker. Again, the AN-94. A lot of people know the AN-94 from various video games. It was in Call of Duty Black Ops 2 as like, it kind of behaved just as like an AK in that game, and it can behave just as an AK, but the AN-94 has a major unique feature, which is the 2-round hyper burst that fires in, I believe, excess of 1,500 rounds per minute, which is insane. It basically allows you to fire 2 rounds super quickly, one on top of the other, before recoil even hits. And I think that 2-round hyper burst is what the gun should be designed around. Well, the full auto should be pretty, because I'm pretty sure the AN-94 actually has a slower fire rate once it converts back to full auto. The AN-94, I'm like 100% confident that in some expansion pack, they are going to add the AN-94 at some point, but I had to bring it up. Next is going to be using the sort of cord counterbalance recoil mechanism. The Russian AK-107 is the first that I'm going to suggest, because this is kind of like, this one's kind of hype, and then the other one is going to be the Cord A545, which I think looks a lot cooler. And the A545, some people might recognize it because it was in some Battlefield games, or its earlier iteration was in some Battlefield games, and I believe it also is in the most recent Call of Duty as the AK-971. It's actually a pretty old gun. People are pretty shocked to hear that it's from 1980, which is pretty old. But the A545 is the most modern iteration of this counterbalance recoil mechanism, and what this does is this provides basically, as the bolt goes backward, an equal mass goes forward, and equal opposite reaction. Yes! And it causes the gun to produce very minimal muzzle flip. I'm sure there's still some rattle as the recoil goes, but it behaved similar to the Vector, where it's countering recoil. And last for 5.45, because 5.45 in Stalker 2, they've done a great job. I'm just gonna suggest light machine gun. We have the RPK-74. You know, it's a possibility. The RPK-74, it's a good light machine gun. It's the more logical of the 2 light machine guns I'm going to suggest. And then the other option is the RPK-16, which I think is the cooler looking of the 2 light machine guns. But the RPK-16, to my understanding, failed in military trials, probably due to the barrel. It's got a pretty small barrel as far as light machine guns go, not only in length, but mainly in thickness. You want your machine gun to be able to endure intense heat as it fires. And I guess the RPK-16 failed in that regard. I'm sure it functions as like an effective weapon, but as a light machine gun, which was its intended role, did not succeed. I think the RPK-16 would look more interesting. I think the RPK-74 would be more realistic. So it's kind of a counterbalance, but I don't think 545 needs an LMG either. It'd be cool because it'd be cool, but yeah. Next is going to be 9x39, and 9x39, the Rhino I talked about earlier uses, but also the round that the VSS Vintorez, AS Val, and OTS 14 Gyurza use, which I believe the Gyurza is called the Grom, and then I have no memory of what the Val and the Vintorez are called. And the first gun I'm going to suggest, this is my personal favorite 9x39 rifle, and the reason why is, I'll get into the reason why in a moment. It's the 9A91. Now, the 9A91 is a compact 9x39 assault rifle. It can be issued without a suppressor and has a large suppressor available for it. So basically the idea is it can be a compact assault rifle that fires that larger 9x39 round, and then it can also behave as a pseudo ASVAL. And the reason why this is my favorite assault rifle in 9x39 is because it appears in Metro Last Light as the VSV assault rifle, which I also believe it's kind of like a combination of the 9A91 and its longer version, the 9A91 being the ASVAL equivalent, and then its longer version, the VSK94, being the VSS Vintorez variant. I do love the VSS, honestly. I'd say the VSS, I'd love to own a VSS more than I'd love to own a 9A91, but the 9A91 I have more memories of using in Metro. The next 9x39 gun I'm going to bring up is going to be the MTS 570. I should say that the proper pronunciation of the MTS 570 is MC 570, which is interesting. Just a little linguistic fact there. Which is a revolving rifle. It's very weird. It's a revolving rifle. It has a bit of a recoil mechanism, but it's not semi-auto as far as I can tell. It's rather a recoil absorption mechanism. And so the MTS 569 is in 12.7 by 55. We'll get into 12.7 by 55 later, but the MTS 570 is the 9x39 version, and I thought this was cool because it's a 9x39 revolver, which we have represented in a fictional sense, but this is a real 9x39 revolver, and it's just cool because it's a revolving rifle. That's just an interesting concept. You don't see a lot of that. I believe this is like a sporting weapon. Next is going to be the AMB-17, which is the 9x39 version of this new Kalashnikov AM platform. It's probably being used in Special Forces roles. It's nice, it's tactical, it would give you a more tactical option for 9x39, sort of westernizing your 9x39, and I think that's interesting. The AM-17, which the other variant, is in 5.45 by 39, I believe, and basically it's a compact suppressed assault rifle. That's its role in life, and so the ASVAL already does that role. This would just be this would be like an upgrade package to that same concept that might appear in a DLC at one point. Finally is going to be the SR3M. I don't actually think the SR3M's that cool, honestly, but I figured I should bring it up since I am going to bring up the other weapons in that lineage later when we get to another round. So now getting into 5.56 by 45, we currently have, I believe, 3 5.56 assault rifles in the game, and I figured I should start out with something other than an assault rifle, that being a bolt-action rifle, the S.T.A.L.K.E.R Scout. I just think it would be a cool idea to have a sniper rifle where you really need to land headshots pretty much exclusively because that 5.56 isn't going to pack as much of a punch, but you'd have a precision package to use. This might be available in the early mid-game, I'd say, maybe late early game, that sort of time period. Just a nice lightweight sniper rifle for somebody to pack. It might be like you have your primary, secondary, and pistol, and then you carry this in your bag because it wouldn't weigh nearly as much as an average gun. I think that would be cool. The next gun is another 5.56 weapon by S.T.A.L.K.E.R, and this is my favorite 5.56 assault rifle, that being the AUG A3. I love the AUG. I really wanted it to appear in Stalker, and I was kind of sad when it didn't, and I would really love if the AUG would appear in Stalker. Just a nice bullpup assault rifle, probably in a DLC of some kind. It would be really cool in my opinion. Another 5.56 assault rifle that they could add to Stalker 2 is going to be the Vazor 96 Barrel. This is a Polish-designed assault rifle. It's based off the AK platform, of course. The great thing about the Barrel is that it's a representation and sort of a demonstration of the true end of communism and Poland's integration into the free world. Chambered in 5.56, it's a modernized Polish 5.56 AK that was introduced in 1996 for Poland because they had recently joined NATO and wanted to transfer from their 5.45 ammunition stocks to the NATO standard 5.56. Next is going to be the HS product VHS-2 assault rifle, which is produced in Croatia and is a very cool, like, in a lot of ways, I think everybody kind of sees it's a hybrid of the G36 style controls into a FAMAS style package. It has a fairly high fire rate, and I just think it would be really cool to see this rifle representing a 5.56 bullpup, although the AUG would already represent a 5.56 bullpup. Maybe this could be a more compact 5.56 bullpup. Speaking of compact assault rifles, the SIG MCX is another option. The SIG MCX has made a lot of rounds as a sort of special forces weapon. I believe it was the weapon that you use in the like counter-terror breaking into a house Special Forces mission in Modern Warfare 2019, the M13, and it was a really cool assault rifle. I think it would be really nice to see. It's essentially what it is internally it's an AR-18 that has been converted to use AR-15 control scheme. And last for 5.56 is going to be the 5.56 LMG, which could either be the FN Mini-Me or M249. I think that's the more obvious choice, but I lean more towards the Knights Armament Company LAMG, which I think is a really cool light machine gun that doesn't get represented nearly enough in games. It uses what's called constant recoil, which is essentially a long receiver with a very powerful spring, so that when the bolt drives back into it, it never truly contacts the rear, which basically changes the recoil impulse from feeling like a series of impacts into one steady push. And as well, the fire rate is so slow because of that it results in a very controllable light machine gun, but more importantly, because of that slow rate of fire, if you have 100 rounds, that 100 rounds is going to last you a long time. It gives you a lot of sustained fire. And next is going to be the 308 that is already in the game. The 308 is only fired out of two guns, I believe, the M1A and the Remington 700 in the game. The first gun that I would really like to see would be the FN-FA-L. Probably a DSA paratrooper variant. I believe DSA produces the SA-58. This was a tactical and is a tactical, but a compact FAL that would make a really cool battle rifle. I think it's kind of sad that you can't really rock a battle rifle in Stalker 2 as it is. I think the 308 shouldn't be as powerful as it is, and instead Magnum rifle ammunition should be introduced to perform in the sense that 308 is currently performing, but not too reduced. It still should be an expensive, powerful rifle round, just not as expensive and powerful, in order to allow battle rifles like the FAL to be used in the way that they were intended, for high volume, high power, precision in close quarters. Next is going to be the Kel-Tec RFB. I really don't know why I added this to the list. I'm going to skim over this. The RFB uses the same magazines as the FAL. It's a bullpup. Rather than ejecting where the action is, it pushes the rounds forward through a tube to eject them out the front of the gun, which is pretty cool. And I guess I probably wanted to bring up Kel-Tec. That's probably why I added this to the list. And last for 308 is going to be the FN S.T.A.L.K.E.R Heavy, SCAR 17. Very like global war on terror. It's 308, very powerful. And it would be another battle rifle like the FAL, but I think the FAL should be added as like a semi-auto, possibly, battle rifle, while the SCAR would be the full auto. And the SCAR would have a slower fire rate than most assault rifles, because it does. It has approximately a 600 round per minute rate of fire on full auto, which is a pretty slow rate of fire, very controllable, but fast enough to make a difference. And the last round that's in the game, it's actually 2 rounds. It's going to be the different types of grenade ammunition used in the underbarrel grenade launchers. These aren't very essential, but I think it would be cool if you could get standalone grenade launchers earlier in the game, earlier than you get the underbarrel grenade launcher, because the underbarrel grenade launchers have their uses, but having a standalone grenade launcher would be kind of cool, because then you could use them earlier in the game. It's that simple. You use them earlier in the game, but the consequence is it's taking up one of your primary weapon slots. So you're losing a weapon, unlike when you get the underbarrels, where you're just gaining a new weapon on your existing rifles. Because the GP25 that's in the game does have a standalone version with a stock that's being used and has been used for some time. I think that would be really cool. And for 40mm, they could go with, there's a number of 40mm grenades from the Western countries. The one I think would best serve this purpose would be the HK-69 40mm grenade launcher, but there's always the Mil-Kor MGL, which is the M32 in the United States military service, or the M79, but I think the HK-69 serves that purpose of being a single-shot grenade launcher using that ammo. And since the M203 is already in the game as the underbarrel grenade launcher for the 5.56 assault rifles, that could be a decent choice. The HK-69 would be a little more interesting in my opinion. So the next round I'm going to talk about is going to be our first round that's not in the game, and the rest of the rounds that I'm going to be talking about are going to be ammunition types that aren't in the game. The first one is the 7.62x25. This is a bottlenecked pistol round that was originally used in the TT-33 Tokarev. It is a higher pressure version of the already existing 7.63 Mauser round that was available for the C96, and during the Chinese warlord era, as well as sometime after, 7.62 Tokarev was commonly used in Mauser C96 pistols. It's dangerous to do. I don't know the success rate of that, so just don't do it. The TT-33 classic, very powerful. It actually defeats a lot of modern body armor, at least pistol-rated body armor. There's not much else to say about the Tokarev. It's simply the 7.62x25 pistol. For the sake of the video, another 7.62x25 pistol would be the CZ or VZ52, which was the Czech 7.62x25 pistol. The CZ52 is a roller-locked pistol, which is pretty interesting. This is different from the MP5's roller delay, just as a point, but for the sake of the game, it wouldn't matter. The next 7.62x25 gun I'm going to suggest is going to be the PPS-43, the Sudayev submachine gun. This was the submachine gun that replaced the PPSH-41 or PPSH-41. The PPS-43 is modest. It doesn't use the drum. It uses a 35-round stick magazine. It was made mostly of stamped metal, and that results in a very crude but effective submachine gun.
This thing just makes you want to defend the shit out of Stalingrad.
And then following that is the aforementioned PPSH-41 or PPSH-41, the Spagan submachine gun. This was the submachine gun that the Soviets entered World War II with, that turned out to be a little too expensive, mainly because of the wood, but also the fitting that was required. The PPS-43 fixed a lot of the fitting issues, because with the PPSH-41, one of the issues is the drums were fit to the individual weapons, so they were not universally interchangeable. So you'd get a drum that would fit one gun, and then you switch to another, and it doesn't work. And that's why most countries that adopted the PPSH-41 after World War II, such as China's Type 50, would go on to use just the sticks. And the last 7.62x25 submachine gun is another Czech submachine gun, that being the SA-26. Now there's the SA-23 and 25, which are the 9mm versions, and then there's the SA-24 and 26, which are the 7.62x25 iterations. And these were interesting because these were the original submachine guns that used a telescoping bolt mechanism, similar to what the Uzi would go on to do later. The SA-24 uses a fixed stock, while the SA-26 uses a folding stock. I think the 26 is the most interesting looking. Though, at the end of the day, I think the PPS-43 and the TT-33 are the main guns that they should use for 7.62x25. The next round is going to be the 5.7x28, as well as the 4.6x30, because they are very similar rounds, but I'm going to start with the 5.7x28. The 5.7x28 is primarily fired out of the 5.7 pistol by FN, very creatively named. And of course, the first submachine gun for 5.7 is going to be the FN P90. 5.7 was originally designed for the FN P90 and the 5.7 pistol under a NATO trial. 5.7 is interesting because it was designed to defeat Soviet body armor. So this would be a lower damage, higher armor penetrating round, and similar to when we were talking earlier about the 45 ACP, I think that would make it better at defeating human enemies, but worse with mutant enemies. Next is going to be a semi-automatic rifle in 5.7, a sort of PCC, that being the CMMG Banshee Mark 57. This would function as sort of a miniature designated marksman's rifle, which I think is really interesting. It's a cool little AR-15 style carbine. I like it. CMMG recently came out with the Descent, but I think that's after the Ukraine war began as well, so it would be anachronistic. And finally is going to be the 4.6x30 ammunition, which is used exclusively out of the MP7 submachine gun. This was what it was designed for as a proprietary cartridge. This was HK's entry into the NATO PDW trials, and for the sake of the game, I think it wouldn't be unreasonable for the developers to use the MP7 and just make it shoot the same 5.7x28, even though that would be less realistic, It's one of those things where you just kind of have to accept it. The MP7 and P90 are both really cool PDWs, very space age, very iconic. I believe every Stalker game has a P90 and an MP7 mod. I think every Fallout game has an MP7 and P90 mod. So I think it's not unreasonable for them to include these submachine guns that are definitely highly desired in some sort of update or DLC. Next is going to be the 9x21 round, and this round is interesting because it was developed, it's a Russian round. I believe there's a 9x21 round that is used fairly commonly in Europe as sort of a workaround to European authoritarian gun laws, where they're not allowed to own specific calibers because the military or the police use them, such as 9x19, illegal in many countries, so 9x21 is the way to work around this law. But this 9x21 is not the same 9x21. This 9x21 was designed to defeat body armor by the Russians, basically behaving in a similar fashion to the 5.7x28, except for Eastern Bloc use. And as I mentioned the SR3M earlier, that being a 9x39 rifle, these SR1M and SR2M were its sort of earlier counterparts. The SR1M is the pistol, and it would behave similar to the 5.7, except using this 9x21 round, which would have a larger mass and probably less penetration, but it would have a lot more penetration than the average 9mm, which would make it an interesting stopgap between the 9mm and the 5.7. And the SR2M would be the submachine gun equivalent. I think the SR2M is interesting in my opinion because it's almost like turning an AS-Val into an Uzi. Like, just if you look at the way the bolt and this receiver design, I don't know if that's like the firing mechanisms are the same, but I do know the look of it feels like an AS-Val that's been converted into an Uzi, and I think that's really cool. I think the SR1M and the SR2M are less likely to appear than the P90, 5.7, and MP7, but I figured I should mention them because I think they're cool. I think I would be doing a disservice if I forgot to mention them. Now, this is going to be an interesting one because this is a shotgun round, of course, that is not 12 gauge, nor is it 20 gauge, or any contemporary gauge that is used in sporting. This is the 23x75mm R, a round that was designed to be used out of a shotgun called the KS-23. And the KS-23 is a shotgun that was designed to use scrapped 23mm cannon barrels. These barrels were deemed unacceptable even by Russian standards, and so they decided that they were going to just throw them away, and instead of throwing them away, they turned them into these weird giant bore shotguns, and I believe approximately 4 gauge, which is pretty huge considering that 12 gauge is pretty large and 10 gauge is the largest common shotgun caliber. It's a measurement of division, dividing a pound of lead in balls through the diameter of the bore results in your gauge, and so a lower number equals a larger diameter. This 23mm portable shotgun cannon is really cool. These have been used for very special purposes and have a large array of very interesting ammo types that I think would be really cool to see in the game. The standard buckshot would be just extreme. I think it holds like 2 rounds in the magazine and then 1 in the chamber. So you're not rocking a lot of ammo, but you're rocking a lot of power for each round. These would be very expensive compared to the 12 gauge. The buckshot would probably be able to easily, at least up close, one-hit an exo. The slugs, if maybe you got like rifled barrel or something as at the technician, could possibly reach out pretty far. There's a flashbang round that's really interesting that fires off. So basically, it blasts out a massive muzzle flash that blinds targets, and then you'd pump the round and you pump the gun and go onto your buckshot or whatever you're using. I believe there's also incendiary rounds available for this. I'm not sure if that's 100% true, but this 23mm shotgun could probably fire basically anything you chuck in the bore. So I think it would be awesome to see the KS-23. This is one I really want to see. I know it's one gun that would use one ammo type, but I think it's one gun that deserves to use its exclusive ammo type just based off how rare, how weird, how crazy it is. So the next caliber that we're going to talk about is going to be the 12.7x55mm. 12.7x55 it's a 50 cal round that is subsonic. It's a compact 50 caliber round. The S.T.A.L.K.E.R assault rifle variant. It appeared as the Odin in Modern Warfare 2019. I'm not 100% sure what the point of it was, other than, of course, a large subsonic round. Its counterpart of course, is a little more logical, that being the VKS or Viklop, which is a silenced sniper style or designated marksman system in this 12.7x55 platform, with basically the same purpose as that earlier 9x39 we talked about, but in a larger diameter. If it were to be added in the game, it would be really cool, but there's not much else to say. Of course, that MTS 569 that we talked about earlier in the 9x39 would be pretty cool to see as well, but it's a give or take. The next round I'm going to talk about is going to be the 300 Blackout, and this is essentially the Western equivalent of that 9x39 we talked about before. I believe the original gun designed for the 300 Blackout was the AAC Honey Badger, which is now produced by the company Q. The Honey Badger SD that I'm showing on screen is a pretty cool little PDW style system in that 300 Blackout. This essentially, the 300 Blackout is taking the 5.56 and necking it up to a 30 caliber instead of the 223 that it uses as standard. I think it would be cool to see the Honey Badger, or there's also that MCX that I mentioned before in 5.56, has commonly been used in 300 Blackout with the LVAW. LVAW standing for Low Visibility Assault Weapon. These weapons would probably have suppressors sort of built into them, though they're not integrally suppressed for the most part. There are some integrally suppressed weapons, such as the B&T SPR 300 bolt action suppressed rifle. And of course, the Honey Badger SD is integrally suppressed. As well, there is an interesting Slovenian design rifle called the Perun X16. The X16 is most commonly in 5.56, but I think a 300 Blackout X16 would be really cool to see. Of course, it's a Slavic weapon. It's interesting in its design. It kind of blends a lot of the aspects of the AK and the AR together, and that's like in the actual mechanism it blends them, not just in the appearance. So having this in 300 Blackout with a suppressor, even if it doesn't have a suppressor, I think it would be really cool. I don't know if the 300 Blackout should appear in Stalker. It's not the most logical round. I think there's some logic to it, with factions like Duty and the Ward possibly carrying stuff like that, because they often carry more Western weapons. So, and you're usually buying multiple types of ammo for the purpose of switching between subsonic and supersonic in order to have greater velocities with the supersonic, and then have, of course, the subsonics for your quiet endeavors. So having the 300 Blackout might be a little weird for Stalker 2, but it'd be cool. And of course, we all know that modders are going to be adding guns like the Honey Badger into the game eventually, so might as well. And then the final round, we're finally here, that we're going to talk about is going to be it's actually two rounds, either the 300 Winchester Magnum or the 338 Lapua Mag. It doesn't really matter. The 338 I think would make more sense if they end up adding something like the 300 Blackout, since 300 WinMag it would get confusing. 338 makes more sense. The main gun that I'm going to suggest for 338, and this is like, I really want to see this in Stalker 2, I think would be awesome, is going to be the S.T.A.L.K.E.R 42. This is the Finnish Magnum sniper rifle, and it's awesome. It rarely gets used in media because it's a European gun. It's very commonly used by military and special forces groups, though, because it's highly reliable, highly accurate, and of course, using very common Magnum rounds. It is chambered in 338 or 300, depending on what you need. Of course, you'd have to purchase it from the factory in that configuration. You're not switching out. But for the sake of it, I will include some other options. One of the options being the DVL-10, which is a sniper rifle that was designed in Russia, and it has an integral suppressor, or at least an integrally suppressed version, with this giant suppressor that takes up the whole barrel. That's pretty cool, but it is what it is. Then there is the Desert Tech SRS Magnum, which is currently actually being seen in Ukraine right now in combat, which is interesting. It is a bullpup bolt action Magnum sniper rifle. They do have 308 versions of these as well, which would be cool. I think that the SRS is probably one of the best because it's being used in Ukraine right now, but the Seiko TRG-42 is also Slavic and awesome. I would love to see the Seiko TRG-42 more than any of these Magnum snipers in Stalker 2. So if they don't add it, and like you're a modder or something and you're watching this, please add the TRG-42. And that is going to conclude the Stalker weapon request video. It was a long one. This took me forever to make. If you actually watch the full thing, thank you. Thank you if you watched it at all, honestly. And I'm sorry that it came out so long. There's just so much to talk about. I did have other rounds and other guns that I wanted to talk about in this video, but I decided to cut them just for the sake of length. At the end of the day, even if, say, Stalker 2 were to just be left in the state that it's in right now, it's a good game, it's in a good state, and I think modders will end up adding almost every gun, if not every gun that I've listed here, to the game eventually. There's packs like Stalker Gamma for the original Stalker that are available, so if you really want to go play a like huge arsenal style Stalker game, I think just go play Gamma, honestly. If any of these guns end up getting added, I will be very happy. There's no doubt about that. As I said before, the things that I want to see the most are going to be that change to 7.62x39 and the addition of 9mm pistols. Those are the biggest things I'd like to see, but it's not like adding those things are essential to making the game good, right? The game is good as it is, so it doesn't really matter. I don't know. I mean, just the fact that Stalker 2 was a game that I enjoyed enough to make a like hour long, it really says something about Stalker. It really says like how much I liked it. So yeah, if you guys have any ideas for weapons or rounds that you'd like to see, please leave them in the comments, and I might make a part 2 to this video like I did with Payday as well. I really hope that the conflict, of course, that Ukraine is struggling with right now, the invasion from the Russian forces, can end soon, and the Ukrainians won't have to suffer any more casualties, any more loss. It's really tragic what's going on there. And it's very impressive how they were able to make Stalker 2 in essentially a war zone, a war-torn country, a game of such great quality. So, yeah, thank you, God bless, and goodbye.